From my learning experience through the term of Gaia awakening and John's teachings, I have come to realize a stable foundation of morality, sanity, and clarity within myself. It has taught me to see the more goodness in nature, to have the perception of supernatural beauty, and to be interactive with the magic that surrounds the earth. It is an ongoing feeling of novelty, excellence, and liberating sensation that manifests and emerges from the alliance with the goddess herself, and the power-sharing arrangement that we share. To use the faculty of true imagination, guided by his story, is to be conscious participant in her journey and in her life force. I am especially grateful to John for the recurring insights that I constantly get through his work and the beautiful moments I've had when I met him. He's a sincere, open-hearted, and lovable man that I have huge respect towards. Yeah. Thank you, man.
It's also very moving for me to be here this evening. I haven't spoken in public in 13 years. And so I come here and I honestly have to tell you, I don't know what I'm going to say or even how I'm going to say it. So I will try to be as direct as possible with you. I don't consider myself to be a spiritual teacher. And one thing I can assure you is that if I am a spiritual teacher, I'm not like any other spiritual teacher that ever appeared. So what I want to do always is to just come from the core. To come from the core. And see if I can reach you in the core. That's my intention. Okay? So I don't know what I'm going to say. I'm not going to talk for long. Pay attention, because this is going to go fast. Because I go very, very fast. You see me standing here in front of you now, you might think I'm just standing here, but I'm not. I'm moving very, very fast. And I thought, well, probably the logical way to talk, I'm going to only talk for about 35 minutes, and I want it to be interactive, you understand? So I want you to feel completely free to ask me anything you like or to say anything you like, okay? But I'm going to start in the logical place just by telling you about this book, okay? Now, the last time I talked publicly was when this book came out, and that was in 2006, in November. It's almost exactly 13 years, right? So what I'm going to tell you in the next 10 minutes is about what this book accomplishes that no other book accomplishes. What is the unique accomplishment of my book? Now, you heard some of it already in the story of Hypatia, beautifully translated by Hans. This is the first chapter of the book. Now, this is a very famous story. This is a true story. There are 6 accounts in the ancient writings, 6 different accounts of this story, and I drew from each one of them. I didn't invent anything. This is what actually happened. This is how it actually happened. And, of course, Hypatia symbolizes the mysteries, and she symbolizes the death of the mysteries, the fate of what happened to the mysteries, and my book is about the mysteries. So I'd like to tell you what I can say proudly that I have accomplished with my book. First thing is that this book restores the narrative of the goddess Sophia, whom people conventionally know as Mother Earth. Okay, the mother goddess, the earth goddess. She has many, many names. But what people don't know is that she has a story. Like anybody else. Like there you are. I don't know you, but if I got to know you, I'd find out that you have a story, don't you? You have a life story. You were born in a certain place. You grew up in this way. You had these experiences that shaped you into what you are. this life, this earth that we are on, has a story. And I restored that story, what had been lost for almost 2,000 years. I didn't make up this story. I often say that, and my students here will tell you, and they will tell you very well, I didn't make it up. I restored it from these lost materials, which were found in Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt in December of 1945, which happens to be about the time that I was born. They may have been discovered on the day that I was born, possibly, but certainly in the same week. And so these Nag Hammadi writings I restored and put together this narrative, which we call the sacred goddess or fallen goddess scenario. So that's one thing that my book does. You will not find anywhere in the world any other book that does this. You will not find any other source that tells you this story. And it is a complete story. I restored it completely. It wasn't easy, I'm telling you. It was a very difficult job to do. I often compare it to like if you had on this wall a huge mosaic that showed some kind of scene. And then there was a bombing and a war, and it was completely destroyed. And then all that would remain was a handful of pieces of this mosaic. And I restored the story from that handful. Second thing that the book does is it tells you the secret of the mysteries. Now this again you will not find in any other book printed on this planet. Now the mysteries, of which Åsa has spoken so beautifully, could be described in many ways, but basically they were the spiritual colleges and universities and centers of learning of the ancient world, of Europe. And they were largely centered around the Mediterranean basin, but they had a network of schools all through Europe, extending into the British Isles, extending into Scandinavia. And these were schools founded by mystics and visionaries and great, brilliant teachers, what I call shamans, but they were intellectual shamans, and they taught many, many things. And one thing that they did in the mysteries was that they had their own private practices when they went into the sanctuaries together, and it was like a group of teachers who were together in a room, and then when they left that room, they went out and taught in the world. But when they were in that room alone, they did something very, very special. And if you go and read every scholar who has ever written about the mysteries, they will tell you exactly what I'm telling you now. Nobody knows what they did in that room. And I tell what they did in that room. So this is another accomplishment of my book. I also give the history of the mysteries. I talk about how they were created probably 6,000 BC, and they have a long history behind them. The Magian order, the mystics, the visionaries, the shamans, the men and women who carried the vision of the beauty of the earth and the power of this earth goddess who created us. She is your mother. She is your divine mother. And they had her story. And from generation to generation, they carried this story and they developed it and they built it into a brilliant and magnificent construction, which was destroyed deliberately at a certain moment in time. So the other thing that I always like to say when I'm talking about this Gnostic mystery material is that when you find this material in this book, when you find it explained to you and offered to you as it can be relevant today, because I want it to be relevant today, we're not talking about ancient history here, my friends. You are looking at the most forbidden, the most demonized, and the most attacked and destroyed knowledge that has ever existed on the face of the planet. Somebody did not want humanity to know what was happening in the mysteries and did not want humanity to know the truth about the Aeon Sophia. And this truth has been more attacked and more demonized than any other message that has ever been produced among us, among the various races of the human species. And this is a fact. This is a fact about what's in my book. Two final things that I would say about it. It also talks about the problem. There is a problem on this planet. That's what I'm going to talk about in the second 15 minutes here, because I'm moving fast. I'm going to talk about the problem of God. Now, no matter who you are, no matter where you grew up, no matter if you're a Hindu, a Japanese, an Australian Aborigine, you're a Swede, you're a Norwegian, you're an Irish, you are implicated in the problem of God, whether you like it or not. Now, you may not be interested in God. You know, you may have been brought up in Christian religion or some other religion, and maybe at some point you thought, I don't really care anymore, you know, it doesn't speak to me, I'm not really interested. Well, if you want to go off and live in the mountains somewhere in a cabin and live a pure life and live with animals and raise herbs and communicate with nature, you can do that. You know, I want to do that myself, in fact. I'm very tempted to do that. But as long as I live as a social creature, interacting with other human beings socially, I cannot avoid the problem of God. It is a really, really big problem. And I can tell you the obvious, because you probably know what I'm going to say next. But what would this world be like today, here in Sweden, here in Stockholm, if we didn't have a religious problem? What if we didn't have a religious problem anywhere? What would life be like? The millions and millions of people who are attached to their religion, the Muslims, the Jews, the Buddhists, the Christians, whether they be Catholic, the millions and millions of people think they're in complete delusion. They think that their faith is necessary for them to live, and that it brings a solution to life. It's just the opposite. Their faith is the problem, and their faith and their religion is creating tremendous problems. So I'm going to talk just a minute now, for 15 minutes, about the problem of God, which I've illustrated over here. So the final thing I want to say about my book is that it gives you the option, which no other book does, and that is the option to be a heretic. Okay? Now, what is a heretic? Well, a heretic is a word that comes from a Greek verb, herrien, and what herrien means is to choose. So if you're a heretic, it means you choose. But what do you choose if you're a heretic? Well, you choose what you want to believe. You choose your concept of God. You choose your concept of humanity. You choose your concept of morals. You choose it. You don't have it given to you. There's a line in my book that I really like. There's 2 or 3 lines in my books that I'm really happy about. And one of the lines says, Christianity is a religion embraced by millions of people, but rarely chosen by anyone. When you're a heretic, you choose your religion, you choose your path of spirituality. Do not take it from someone who says you are obligated to take it, and you are obligated to use it in the way that they tell you to use it. So my book is an invitation to heresy. It's a challenge to heresy. And it's a huge, huge challenge. And it's a challenge that is only going to grow bigger and bigger. And as this challenge grows bigger, and as it becomes more obvious that religion is not a solution to our life in this world, but it's a problem, this book becomes stronger. As the situation gets worse, the message of this book becomes stronger. And finally, speaking about the book, before I get to the problem with God over here, finally, there is an expression in the book, in the title, which is Sacred ecology. Well, what is that? What is sacred ecology? Now, pretty much anyone with two particles of brain to rub together knows what ecology is, right? Oh, ecology, right? You know that Sweden is now famous for someone who's coming out and talking about ecology, supposedly, right? But is this climate change panic really about ecology? No. I'll tell you what ecology is. Ecology is simply the proper management of the human habitat. So if you want to talk about ecology, you talk about the plastic in the ocean. You talk about pure water to drink. You talk about chemical pollution. You talk about the pollution in the foods. You talk about real pollution, right? I was sitting at breakfast this morning in this wonderful hotel, and there's two Swedish people sitting beside me. We got into a conversation. You know, I said to them, carbon emissions, right? CO2, right? I said to them, do you know that you breathe CO2? They said, what? So then I said, don't you know? Don't you know that you breathe CO2? How can CO2 be a pollutant? It's absolute and total insanity, and it's a lie, and it has nothing to do with taking care of the environment, because the problems of the environment are very obvious, and they have nothing to do with CO2, and you can't control it, and it's not human generated. And when you've been told that there is a scientific consensus that supports the notion that climate change is human generated, you've been lied to. It's a lie, and it's not true. So this book is about the true view of ecology, but it's sacred ecology. So what is sacred ecology? Well, sacred ecology is simply the way that you practice taking care of the earth, taking care of the food that you eat and what you drink, your environment, in the awareness that the earth is your mother. You do it for her, but you also do it for yourself, because she gave you this habitat to live in, and if you don't take care of the beautiful habitat she gave you to live in, you're finished. And it has nothing to do with carbon emissions. Okay? So, sacred ecology, what does sacred mean? Sacred is a word that comes from a Sanskrit root, sak, which you find in the word Shakti, which is a name for that. Shakti. Shakti is the feminine power of the universe, as opposed to Shiva, which is the masculine power. It's a very simple equation. There are no transgender entities in that equation. And that equation of Shiva Shakti made everything together. It made your hair, the color of your hair. It gave you your cells, the mitochondria in your cells. It made everything in the natural world. It made the oceans, it made the sky. And when you give it your recognition, and I mean a conscious recognition, this is not an act of faith, it's an act of recognition. Do you see the difference between that? When you bring your conscious recognition of your heart and your mind to your source, to what is your source, then you are connected to the sacred and you become sacred. And the way that you live becomes a sacred way to live. And it doesn't have anything to do with fucking pretenses of being sacred and being spiritual. Nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with dressing and acting in a certain way and wearing certain things unless you do it for your pleasure. If you do it for your pleasure, yes. But the sacred has nothing to do with this decor and this costume that has been attached to it. It's a naked force that you carry. So sacred ecology is the path ahead, the path we're entering now, through this book and through the return to our Divine Mother. How do you return to her? Well, you recognize her. Recognition is more powerful than any religion, any dogma, anything that any pope or priest ever taught. This simple act of recognition. And you already have this act. You already have it at your fingertips. But what you may not know, which is what the Gnostic knows, is how far you can go with it. How far you can build it. Of course, when you walk out here and you look at these golden leaves on the ground, I mean, what do you see? What do you see? We drove here onto this island at this moment in autumn, in this crystalline light of this alchemical perfection of nature. Dropping these leaves, and I see it's like a treasure. I want to get out of the car and I want to go and pick them up like they were gold coins. So, whenever you have responded to nature, to a bumblebee, to a duck, to the sound of a duck, whenever you have responded to the beauty of the clouds, whenever you have done that thousands and thousands of times, you have this recognition. But I'm here to tell you that you can't even begin to imagine where you can go with it. And that's what the Gnostic does. That's what the Shakta does. Right? A Shakta, we give ourselves these names because we're a cult. But as I say, I am the leader of a cult. This is true. But it's an educational cult. I'm not here to convert anybody. I'm here to enlighten. So that's what my book has accomplished. That's why I'm here today, because of this book and the wonderful people who found it and then found me. And I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes now about the problem with God. Okay? I love to talk about this problem because it gets me really angry. But I can be pretty good when I'm angry. And I will promise I will behave myself. Simple, to describe the problem of God. So here's God up here, the big G, in quotes. Always put God in quotes, okay? And, of course, what is religion? Well, religion is the game or the claim that there has been some contact between God and the human races. Notice I don't say the human race. So, what do the Jews claim? Let's just pick them because they're an easy target, right? What do the ancient Hebrews claim? Oh, well, you know the story. They claim that there was Abraham and God talked to Abraham and there was Moses. What are they talking about? They're talking about contact. There was contact. All religions begin with a claim of some kind of contact. So, because it goes to the A, which is the Abrahamic religions. And there are 3 Abrahamic religions. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Got me? Is that correct? You know they're all from the same thing. They're all from the same root, don't you? You think they're different? Nope. They're not really different at all. They're just presented in different ways, which can be very confusing. You see? For instance, we live in a world today, where people are saying, oh, Jews and Muslims, ooh, this is a bad thing. Well, this is a difficult situation because, Isn't it true to say that, like, Muslims don't like Jews, right? There's a lot of problems between Muslims and Jews. Muslims and Jews are just the same thing. They're just Arabs of two different tribes. That's all they are. There's no difference. Oh, but then there's the Christians. Well, we stand apart. So this is what I was given to understand when I was brought up in a Christian community in Maine. Yeah, you read the Old Testament and you read about the contact with God, because all religion begins with a claim to contact God. Is that simple enough? I mean, can anyone argue with that statement? I think that's inarguable. And who it was? Well, it was Moses, it was Muhammad, it was Allah, it was so-and-so. You have this whole list, and they're all bearded men, by the way, which is a bit of a problem. Right? And so they contacted God, and they founded these different religions. And then, of course, there's the Old Testament and the New Testament. So they were God contacted the Jews first. Who knows? Maybe God is even a Jew. How would you like that? How would you like to be a mystic and you ascend to heaven and you find out that, oh, God is a Jew? Well, maybe God is a Buddhist. Or, could God be like a Taoist, But basically, I was brought up thinking that God chose the Jews to reveal himself to the world. Have you ever heard that story? That story. Okay? And then there was another trick in the game. Do you know what this trick is? This trick goes like this. Well, yeah, there's the Old Testament and there's a New Testament. And yeah, Christianity sort of did come out of Judaism. But no, then it developed completely in its own way on its own terms, right? You follow my logic? Am I making sense? It ain't true. It ain't true. It's Judeanity. All of it. All of it is Judeanity. In this group. So if you want to go to the traditions and the things that you're taught and told about contact between human beings and God, you must go to Judeanity, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And they will just give you different versions of the same story because they are the Abrahamic religions, and every single religious scholar living today will confirm what I'm saying. Not saying anything unusual, am I? Okay? Now over here, you have a different set of options. Because over here, there is a list of different ways that the story has developed about God contacting humanity and developing the relationships. So you have Buddhism. But of course, Buddhism really sort of doesn't have a God in it. So you have to say, well, what's that about? You have Vedanta. Not Hinduism. Hinduism is not a religion, by the way. Hindu means a culture. The religion of India is the Vedic religion. Buddhism, Vedism, Shinto, Taoism, the indigenous religions, and then you have, of course, atheism and agnosticism are the people who just don't want to be bothered. Okay? So I'm not going to talk about them right now because we're living in what is called, a Christian country. When I was thinking about doing this talk, I thought, I think I should get a bottle of milk and stand here with a bottle of milk. Okay? I could get a bottle of milk from my cows of my good friend Newt here, and that milk would be milk because that milk would be raw milk. Pure raw milk from cows that are not raised on hormones, right? So I could stand here in front of you. I thought I'd do this stunt. I'm not going to do it, obviously. But I'm going to tell you about it anyway, because it's kind of amusing. I thought, okay, I'm standing in front of this Swedish people, and I'm saying, this is milk. Swede is milk. But what is a Swedish Christian? Well, that's pasteurized milk. That's homogenized milk. That's UHT, ultra high temperature milk. And is there a difference between raw milk and pasteurized milk, there are some people who don't even know that raw milk exists. Raw milk exists, and pure Swedes exist who are not Christian, but they were Christianized. So I would never say that Sweden or Ireland or Italy or Spain or any country in Europe is a Christian nation. Because just as you have raw milk and pasteurized milk, they are Christianized nations. They are Christianized people who formed nations, and in that long historical process of one generation after another, they developed the idea in their brain, oh, we're a Christian nation. No, you're not. You are a nation of people, of a folk identity, of a genetic identity, who were Christianized like milk is pasteurized. And in that Christianized identity, you develop this nation, which you call Sweden. And it's the same for Spain, it's the same for France, it's the same for all of them. So the problem with God is that this is what you have been given. You didn't choose this. Nobody chooses this. You're born into it, right? This is what you've been given to tell you what you, inside your mind and inside your heart, have as a relationship to the source of your life and the relationship to God and the divine. And I'm telling you that if you want to be a heretic, you can have a much better time with that proposition. Because if you are a heretic and you choose to reject all religion and go looking for the source, you can find the source. And you can find your connection with this source. And it is more beautiful, more intelligent, more noble, and courageous than anything that comes out of these religions, which are corrupt and sick belief systems that have been created to control society. I've often said that Sophianic Animism, which is a term I'm going to talk about later, and Gnosticism is not another form of religion. No matter what you go away with this evening when you leave here, do not think that I am here presenting to you another form of religion. I'm doing something a lot better than that. I'm presenting you a complete alternative to religion. And when we can take the path toward this alternative, then it becomes glaringly obvious that religion is a problem and God is a problem. And you may want to ignore it. There are days, believe me, when I would love to ignore the problem. But as long as I'm a social being, I can't ignore that problem. Do you see that? Can't. So, what did I write here? Oh yeah, I just want to mention this thing called interfaith. Have you ever heard about interfaith? Have you ever heard the term interfaith? Yeah, you might have it in Sweden. They have branches all around the world, and these are just such wonderful people. They come from Buddhism and Shintoism and Taoism, and they're Protestants and they're Catholic and they're Jews and they're Muslims, and they all sit around in a room and they all get together, and that's called interface. But I'll tell you that there's someone who's not in that room, and that's a Gnostic. And I'll tell you, if you go and look at these interfaith groups and you read their mission statements and you look at their meetings, you will find a very great omission, because Gnosticism is not included. And there's a really good reason why they don't include Gnosticism, because it contains the ultimate critique of religion. And they don't want to have anyone around critiquing their belief systems. They just want to get together and sing Kumbaya and feel very friendly. And, oh, you call it Allah, you call it Jehovah, it's all the same God, That's how they want to be in interfaith. And I'm telling you that the Gnostic stands outside of all this. So you go from the G of God to the G of Gnosis, of the Gnostic. And the central figure of the Gnostic view of life, I call it the Gnostic vision of life, is the goddess. Sophia. Now notice that I say Sophia, I don't say Sophia. Because Sophia is a name you would give to a human girl, my daughter Sophia. I call it Sophia. You have to say Sophia, and you have to say it in that way. I like to say Sophia rhymes with desire. And there's a big element of desire in Sophia. In fact, you're here because of the desire of Sophia. This whole world that we're in, which I call a divine experiment on this planet, is her experiment. You're in an experiment. And when you know who created that experiment and why they did, that's gnosis. And that is not a belief system, my friends. It is something that you can verify. And my devoted students here will tell you that, and they will tell you how you verify it. Nothing goes in Gnosticism on belief or faith. Nothing. You have to have the proof. You have to have the evidence. You have to verify it. That is the Gnostic path. It's the path of knowledge. So recognition of the divine Sophia and knowledge of her ways, knowledge of her ways, knowledge of her designs, knowledge of her purposes, how to get to know her, how to get to know that the earth is a living entity, that she existed before the earth existed. One of the points of Gnostic cosmology, and we're going to get a little more of this evening, one of the points of Gnostic cosmology is that this goddess Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, she did not create the earth. In fact, no one created the earth. The earth is not created. The earth is emanated. This is a very different event. So, she did not create the earth, she turned into the earth in the massive process of her dreaming power. We talk a lot about dream, the dreaming power of the Aeon Sophia. So I think I would close, and we can talk a little after I'm finished, but I don't want to talk too long. I think I would close on 2 points. It's just 6 minutes past 7. I'm going to close on 2 points. I love these things. I love this knowledge. It's a knowledge that you love. It's a knowledge that loves you. Isn't it? It's a knowledge that loves you because she created you as her magical child to be playful at a genius level. Genius level. And the more you learn in the Gnostic, the more you approach that level of the genius of her child. You are her magical child, and you can know things that are transcendent and sublime, that become a part of your flesh and blood. And that is the Gnostic path. It's not a path of faith. So I just want to conclude by giving you 2 memes, okay? Memes, themes. First meme is, when values part from faith. Now, whatever you get from me this evening, I hope at some point when you leave here in the subsequent days and you're maybe sitting in a cafe and thinking about what I've said or reading the book, that you go through this in your mind. You say this to yourself. Just say, when values part from faith. What does that mean? Okay? Just float that in your mind, and I'll pick that up in my second part of my talk, okay? Because I'm doing it in 2 parts. Is everyone with me so far? Doing good? Okay, now I'm going to give you a real thrill. This is a real thrill. It never stops being a thrill. It always gets better. Some people have said that life is a dream. Okay? There was a Spanish playwright who wrote a play called La vida es sueño. Life is a dream. Edgar Allan Poe was a romantic poet of the 19th century. He said that life was a dream. Other people have said this, life is a dream. Sometimes they say it's an illusion, but we're not talking about illusions here. You say, once again, life is a dream. But whose dream is it? See, this is the big question. If you want to go into Gnosticism, if you want to take, you may already be in it, because I don't know. I haven't asked any of you, what you know about my work, or do you know about the narrative. I'm not going to bother with all that, because I'm just core. This is all core. If you don't get it in the core, you're not going to get it at all. That's how pure this is. What I'm saying to you is the purest distillation of what can be known about why we are here. And I wouldn't even call it a spiritual program, because it's so much better than a spiritual program. I don't have a spiritual program, do I? Do I have a spiritual program? No. I have practices and disciplines that we do, but it's not a spiritual program as such. Gnosis is what allows you to find what's in your core that connects you to the source of life, and then you're on. And one of the ways to trick yourself, put yourself under a spellbound, right? One of the ways to get yourself spellbound with the power of this Gnostic way is to say, whose dream is it? Now, have any of you ever experienced lucid dreaming? You all know what lucid dreaming is, I take it. Okay? So it's different from an ordinary dream. In an ordinary dream, is, but in a lucid dream, it's like, hey. I'm like walking down the street, but I'm dreaming. Okay? She is dreaming this event right now. She has dreamed everything that has ever happened upon this earth, which is the metamorphosis of her body. She is dreaming your life. You don't have a life of your own. You go around thinking you have a life. You don't. Your life is just an episode in her dreaming. That's all it is. And so it's great to say that life is just a dream, as long as you know whose dream it is. And it's not your dream. It's hers. And the acceptance and recognition of that fact is so beautiful that I can't even tell you what it does to you to accept that simple fact, and that this is real. She is dreaming the world right now. It wasn't created like a pot that a potter created and then put on the shelf. It wasn't created by the Father God Jehovah in 7 days or by any other God. It is being created now. At every moment. That's what I mean by emanation. The earth was never created. It is being emanated. It is a living dream. And if you want to know how that dream works, and you want to be involved in it and interactive with it, you can do that. You can do that. That's the option that comes through the Gnostic way, and that's what my book has brought to this world. Voila. I should say, that's what this book has brought into this world. I just happen to be the one that wrote it. But somebody had to do it. It had to come through somebody, and it just happened to come through me. What's that?
The book was going to be dreamed.
She was dreaming this book. She had to dream up someone who could write this book, and the story of how she did that is pretty fucking amazing, right? But the way she's dreaming your life is also just as amazing. It's just as amazing. And there was a wonderful clip, I'm just going to close now, to say that there was a wonderful clip that's done by one of my students in the States. He calls himself Noose on the Loose, because Nous is the name for intelligence in the Gnostic teaching, and Gnosis is about intelligence. And I can tell you a few things about her, your Divine Mother. She likes them smart. She doesn't like dummies. She's very discriminating. She allows all life in her generosity, but if you want to get to her, you got to be smart. You cannot be a dummy. And so Noose on the Loose did this. Have you seen this one more than anything? That Noose, this clip that he did on YouTube. You've seen it. Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful. It really is. It's just like 5 minutes long, and it's like quoting some things I said. But it shows these mothers, right? It shows these 6 or 7 mothers standing there, and they come out, and then their children come out. And their children are like 4, 5, 6, and they blindfold these children. And then they have one child at a time go up and like feel the woman to say, well, can the child tell blindfolded which one is his mother or her mother? And they don't speak. They just touch their face and they feel them. Well, that's what she's doing to you. And that's what you do to her. And she wants you to find her. She wants you to find her in this dream. She doesn't just want to dream the life of the human races. It's races, okay? I'll talk about humanity in my second talk. And if you think this is a car wreck, wait until you hear what I have to say about humanity. That's like the biggest disaster after religion. But she wants her children of humanity to see her, and she wants them to become the magical children that she dreams them to be. And that's the message of Gnosis. So if you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free.
Why is she dreaming?
She's dreaming because she does basically what all the divine beings do. In the Gnostic teachings, the word for a god is an aeon, A-E-O-N. So we talk about aeons. And probably the best translation of the word aeon is like a generator. I like this word, that the aeons are generators. So there are these aeons, and what the Gnostics teach about them is very simple. They are like, they're material. Everything is material, by the way. This is another Gnostic teaching. And the aeons are basically like Sophia, let's just take her. They are these powerful currents of energy that live in the core of our galaxy. The Sophia narrative is a story about our galaxy and the core of our galaxy. And so they are fountainheads of love and pleasure and beauty. And out of the fountainheads of these aeons, these gods, they want to create things that they can play with. And the way that they create is called dreaming. It's a physical term. It's like a term in physics. It means that they don't create things like a potter creates a wheel, but that they generate things. And so dreaming is the basic way of creation or manifestation of all the gods. That's a basic Gnostic teaching. They dream to amuse themselves, and they dream to create experiments that they can watch, that they can observe. And sometimes they get involved in those experiments, and sometimes they just stand back and they watch them happen. So it's a big question that you ask, and a very good question. No one ever asked me, why does she dream? But I can't answer it adequately, to be honest with you, without giving maybe a 20-minute talk on that subject. But I'll give you that's a taste of an answer. I realize it's not adequate. Okay? Anyone else?
Where's from what I understand, we're her living tree, but she also wants us to have freedom of heart within that tree, as in some sort of manifestation of control over our own fate within her story. Where does that for me can seem like slightly blurry? Is it a case that once you reach a point where she can taste you within the tapestry, you then have a certain amount of controlling yourself within that field?
Well, that's a hell of a question, Sam. Like I'm trying to untangle it. It has several parts.
I'm a bit lost in it, but I like it.
Yeah, all right. I think it's helpful to always go back to the mother-child relationship. Say the mother has a child, maybe the child's autistic, maybe the mother's autistic. We've talked about that. Autism is a really core subject in regard to Gnosticism. But basically, the mother knows that her child is very talented, so she has to protect the child and has to teach it certain things, but at a certain point she wants it to just break free on its own terms. Okay? That's how I would paraphrase what you're asking. Well, that's exactly our situation today. We are breaking free, but we cannot break, it's a paradox, we cannot break free unless we're in a relationship to her. You'll never be free of your relation to her. You will always be bonded in your relation to your Divine Mother and her dreaming power. But then she gives you that dreaming power to be your own, and you are free to use it as you wish. I'd put it in that way.